Welcome to EAC Speaks, the podcast where we dive deep into the movement to end the HIV epidemic right here in the heart of the South, Arkansas. I'm your host, Eddie Wiley, and together we're going to explore the stories, insights, and passion that fuels engaging Arkansas community's mission. Join us on this journey as we unite voices and take meaningful steps toward a world free of HIV stigma. Now, get ready for a conversation that matters. This is EAC Speaks. Hello out there in podcast land, and welcome to EAC Speaks, the show where we dive into important conversations about health, wellness, and the power of community. Today's episode is a special one. We know that the holidays are fastly approaching, and it's typically a time where folks spend with their families. Well, for many of us, that's not an option for whatever reason. And no matter that reason, EAC offers that support for people living with HIV. Living with HIV can present unique challenges, not just medically, but emotionally and socially as well. The journey can sometimes feel isolating, but having a strong community can make all the difference. Our guest today knows that firsthand. Joining us today is Vadi, a dedicated support group facilitator who works closely with people living with HIV. Through their leadership and guidance, they've helped countless individuals find strength, understanding, and a sense of belonging in a time when they actually need it the most. We're going to talk about what's it like to lead a support group, the challenges participants face, and how support can change lives. Whether you're someone living with HIV, a caregiver, or simply curious about how community support works, this episode is full of insights you don't want to miss. So without further ado, let's dive into the conversation with Vadi. Welcome, Vadi.
Hi, Eddie. It's nice to be here and to have an opportunity to talk about what we do here at EAC when it comes to support groups.
That's awesome. So do you want to tell the people a little bit about yourself?
Certainly, I am originally from Puerto Rico, but I grew up in Tucson, Arizona. I have been living here in Arkansas, and next month it's going to be a year. I am the newest staff member here at EAC. I came from Florida, and currently I work as the bilingual community health specialist. I focus primarily on the Latino community in the state of Arkansas, but specifically in the central region. Arkansas is a pretty big state, so I've been doing most of my work in the central region, which covers Little Rock, Searcy, all of that part of the state.
Cool. That's amazing. The great work that we're doing at EAC is really game changing. So welcome to the EAC team. It's been a few months has it been
It's going to be a year next month that I've been here
with EAC?
with EAC.
So you've been over time. It ain't just been a few
It's
months.
been a while. It's been a minute.
Cool. So talk to us about the group. Can you share a little bit about the support group that you lead?
Okay, I facilitate a support group for Latinos, Latinas living with HIV. It is part of the support groups that we have here at EAC, and it is called Unidos, which is united in Spanish. The little change that I made is on the O, I actually put the at symbol to make it a lot more inclusive for the population that we're trying to reach here in the state. The group focuses in the central region with plans, future plans of making it broader to the other areas that we serve at EAC, like the Northwest and the Texarkana area. But for now, we only are meeting here in Little Rock. It meets on the fourth Saturday of every month from 6 to 8 p.m. here at our offices in Little Rock. And it's a group for, like I mentioned, Latinos living with HIV, people who are newly diagnosed or have been diagnosed for a long time. And the difference in this group is that it's facilitated and run in Spanish. There's no English in this group. We don't conduct our meetings in English, and the people that are attending the group are people whose primary language is Spanish, and they don't have access to other support groups because they don't speak English, they don't understand English. So this is an opportunity and a space for them to have to talk in a language that they understand and that they can communicate with.
Mm. So that's really important that we do have groups where folks who have a specified need can find that support. So maybe I'm gonna ask you this: what's the importance of having groups where people who may not speak English or who don't speak English actually have a space where they can come together?
It is critical, it is essential. It's one of the biggest barriers that I have seen since I've been living here in this state. Because if you don't have access to the language, if you don't understand the language, first, you're not going to access services. You're not going to be able to feel comfortable going into a clinic, meeting with your doctor, meeting with your provider, accessing information on the web, things that we take for granted because some of us speak English and it's, very easy to navigate and find information. If you don't have access to the language, if you can't read the language, if you can't speak the language, you're not going to get in touch with people who can provide you services. One of the barriers that I have found is that when people do connect with services, we have to provide interpretation. That is critical, it's essential, and honestly, it's very much lacking in this area. We don't have people who are qualified to be medical interpreters, to actually be with people and support them in their process of not only knowing that they are diagnosed, but also receiving ongoing care. And one of the things that I have been dealing with and facing is actually going with people to their clinical appointments, meeting with them when they go to the different doctors, and not just HIV, anything related to their health, and having to be that communication between the providers and the client, the person who's there. Because once again, they don't have access to the services, they don't attend the service, or if they do, they just sit there and just nod their heads and say yes to anything, but then not follow through on anything.
Hmm. That's really important for providers out there to hear because it goes beyond just providing translated materials. It's actually putting into action, investing in medical interpretation, investing in community health workers or navigators or linkage folks as well. So um, other providers out there that are listening, definitely invest in your community because it's beyond English speakers. It's beyond folks born in this country. So thank you for answering that for me.
No problem.
So now tell me what inspired you to become a group facilitator? Because you could have easily sat around and just not feel the need. So what inspired you to do it?
Well, as someone who has been living with HIV since 2015, but being bilingual, I know firsthand what it felt like first being diagnosed and having access to the information and knowing what I needed to do to take care of my health. When I think about my other fellow Latinos who don't speak English, I knew that it's something that needs to be available. And what motivated me was being that person who could approach other people and talk about my experiences and help them gain access to services. I come from an area, well, many different areas because I've lived in most of the US at this point and also Puerto Rico, where a lot of people don't really approach the medical community if they can understand what they are being asked to do or what they need to use to follow up with their care. So I moved here from Florida about a year ago, and I was looking for an opportunity where I could do more than just be an advocate. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to make a change. I wanted to be able to be a voice for people who don't necessarily have a voice. And I have really found out here in Arkansas because there is so limited professionals who work in this field that are fully bilingual, because that's the difference. Saying that you're bilingual and actually identifying with the people that you're trying to serve is completely different. And I have seen firsthand how being able to communicate with people from not necessarily Puerto Rico, because the people that I work with here are from Mexico, Venezuela, Colombia, Central America. So it's not even the people that I'm used to working with. It's people from other Spanish speaking countries who don't speak the same language, Spanish, I mean, that I do, the same dialect, but still I'm able to communicate with them effectively based on training that I have and been able to bridge that gap so that they understand that they're not alone, that they have somebody that can speak and advocate and empower them to be their own voices. That's also very critical because once we have people that access services, we want to be able to also make sure that they are able to speak for themselves.
That empowerment is really critical. So, talk to me about a typical session. What does a typical session look like? Are there any key activities or discussions that you bring up?
Well, my group is very relatively new. This is going to be like the fourth month that we are meeting. It started based on the number of people that I was already working with, and I was trying to find a way of bringing them all together so they could see that they're not alone. So the very first meeting was basically a welcoming icebreaker type of meeting where I had food and we basically sat around, talked a little bit about ourselves, shared where we were from, and it was very informal, very low key, very relaxed. After that, I've had subsequent meetings where I've had topics come up from them. Actually, the second meeting that I actually had them brainstorm what do they want to talk about, because I have a long list of things that I could talk about, from medication, being adherent, diets, all sorts of things, understanding what HIV is, understanding how HIV impacts the body. All of that is awesome and can be covered in a support group. But I need to talk to the people that I have there, people who don't necessarily have access to all this complicated information. So I wanted to find out what do they want to talk about. And one of the first things that they mentioned to me was we want to get to know other people that are also living with this. We want to be able to talk about our experiences. We want to be able to talk about our countries, what it's like to be living in Mexico versus Venezuela, not knowing that we have HIV, but now here in the States, that's what we have in common. So how do we make connections with each other based on this reality? So I created activities and basically just had an open forum where they come in and they talk about what they are feeling at that particular moment. We're meeting once a month. They've been asking me to meet more than once a month. So that's something that I'm also looking to do in the near future. But I keep it very informal because most of the people that I am working with in this group are people that work basically 7 days a week. So they have very limited time and they're not there to sit and talk about complicated issues, which are important in the context of a support group. But they want more of a space to talk about what they're feeling and dealing with during the week. And the fact that they have other people who are living with HIV who have to go to a clinic to get medication, that sort of thing, it really makes an impact and helps them to understand that they have that support and they can communicate if they wish to during the week.
That's amazing. I love that. The mix. It's like balancing the topics and the space that you're in together.
Yeah, and the most recent meeting that I actually had a pharmaceutical come in, Viv Pharmacy, and they gave a very good presentation. They were at their one of their sites in Texas, and I had one of the representatives here in the office, and they were basically sharing about how HIV medication works
Hmm.
in Spanish. That was a very interesting meeting because the participants had a lot of questions
Hmm.
about what medication they're currently taking and what are some of the options that they have also that are currently available. They did not know, for example, that Aptitude is a injectable medication for people living with HIV, and they were like, "Oh wow, we have options aside from taking a pill once a day." But the information was given to them in Spanish, so it's something that they learned that they can now think about, is this something that I want to do for myself, or do I want to keep taking my one pill a day regimen?
Giving options. I love that. So, how do you balance offering guidance and facilitating while ensuring that your group members actually feel empowered to share and support each other?
I balance it by being basically open and keeping an open forum in the group because I want them to feel that they can talk about whatever it is on their mind and not have it structured to a point where we're going to talk about one topic and that's it.
Hmm.
I want them to feel that it is their space. It is a safe space for them to come to and literally talk about whatever it is on their mind. Sometimes they want to talk about how frustrating their week was, and that is okay because they have a space in Spanish to do so. During the week, they don't have that space. They don't have a place they can go to and vent and feel heard. Well, this is a space to do that. And I interject with things that I feel can talk about. Like, for example, stigma. How do you deal with stigma not speaking a language in a new country? And how do you deal with disclosure? Some of them have not disclosed to their families, some of them have not disclosed to their sexual partners. So that's another topic that I interject, keeping that environment open for them to talk about what they're feeling. Because at the end, I really want to create a space for them to feel comfortable coming back and not have it where they don't feel that they're heard and shut down on me and not return.
Absolutely. So, you've had 4 meetings so far. How many people are you averaging?
So far, I'm averaging 8 people, between 4 and 8 people. The meeting with the pharmaceutical had 11 people that came. So my average is around 8 people, sometimes 4 or 5. It really depends on the dynamic of the individuals because in my particular experience, people work and my people work Monday through Sunday.
Wow.
It's not like they have a break where they can take 2 hours to come to, an event. And that's the reality of running a group for Latinos here in Little Rock that I've experienced so far. They work and they work long hours and they work in things that we don't work in. I work in an office setting. I don't work in construction. I don't work in restaurants or hospitality all day long. So I have the flexibility of saying at the afternoon, in the evening, I'm going to sit together with a group of people. Some people work even on Saturdays from 8 o'clock in the morning to 9 o'clock at night sometimes. And they take the time out of their work schedule to meet once a month. But I also have to be very understanding of what their schedule is and not impose. Let me give you an example. When I first started the group, I wanted to do it from 1 o'clock in the afternoon to 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturdays. Why? Because we have the English speakers group that meets at from 1 to 3 on the first Saturdays of every month. So I was like, that's perfect. They're running very smoothly. It works for them, not with the community I wanted to reach because at that time they're literally at work. Nobody was going to show up between 1 and 3. So I had to be flexible and move it to a time where they were probably going to be more available, and that's from 6 to 8 p.m. There's talk about maybe changing a little bit later because the fact is that they work all day and they don't want to come to the group exhausted, not even able to shower, etc. So I have to be very aware of what the dynamics is, and also I have to be aware of maybe even changing the time to another time instead of Saturdays. So I always have to be listening to what they need and try to figure out a way of making sure that what I am doing is to benefit them.
I love that. That's really being adaptable to the need. Um, and that's something to be admired, honestly, because a lot of times in the field, we see organizations and advocates host events, host support groups, and it's not always at an accommodating time for folks. So being adaptable is really important to really see the success of the group.
Exactly. And not only that, but if I'm not adaptable, they're not going to show up and then I'm not going to have a group. And the whole point of creating a group for Spanish speakers is so that that space is available for them. So I have to be sensitive to what they're telling me and I follow their lead. If they can't do it, then we have to figure out a way of making sure that they can come in and provide them, the support during the week as well.
Absolutely. So let's talk about support. What role does peer support play in the lives of people living with HIV?
I believe that it plays a very important role because when you're isolated and when you don't know anybody else, and when you're thinking that you're dealing with something that, you know, is so complicated, you probably won't be adherent to your medication. You probably won't feel that going to your doctor visits is important. But when you connect with somebody who has had that experience and knows what it is to navigate this, it makes a huge difference. And when it's somebody who speaks your language, you're more inclined to actually follow through and go to your appointments and follow what your doctors are recommending you to do. I'm not an expert. I'm a peer who has lived through this, who has navigated it and is able to communicate that to somebody who doesn't speak English. So they listen to me and they appreciate the fact that I go with them to their appointments, that they're not going in there by themselves. Now, we have a very interesting dynamic here that I've seen so far. We do have interpreting services that are done via phone. But what are some of the barriers to that? Some people don't feel comfortable. They don't connect with that. They don't feel that having somebody over the phone who doesn't know them is the most effective way of reaching them. So they won't go to their appointment. And they contact me and they call me, are you available? Can you go with me to see my doctor? I don't want somebody over the phone who I don't know knowing about my business or even knowing my name. So those are some of the things that I have already seen. And peer support is really important. It makes a huge difference to getting somebody to stay adherent to medication, for example.
Hmm. So, what are some of the things that you all talk about in order to help deal with some of that stigma or self blame, whether it's internal stigma or external factors?
We talk about, how long have you been in the country? When did you know that you were diagnosed with HIV? How was that experience for you? How
Hmm.
was it to be here and go to a doctor who doesn't speak any Spanish and tell you that you have something? And automatically the idea is, oh, I have SIDA, which is AIDS. Nope, that's not it. That's not what's happening. Let me explain to you what's happening. So we go through a process of education as well, so that stigma of I already have a disease that's going to kill me is slowly eroded, because you want to make sure that they understand that living with HIV is like having a chronic disease. It's not a life sentence. You can live a very healthy life if you stay on your medication, if you follow your doctor's orders, if you diet, if you exercise. You don't have to, you know, limit yourself in terms of what you can do in your life, but you have to be sure that you are in care and that you're following. I have people that are very glad that somebody can talk to them and understand what they're saying and answer all of their questions, because when somebody is newly diagnosed, for example, they have a lot of questions.
Hmm.
And if they're not getting those answers, they're not going to go through a doctor. They're not going to look up in Google because that's overwhelming for them. They're not understanding what they're reading. So if I don't understand, I'm not going to follow through.
Hmm. Now, earlier you mentioned disclosure as a barrier for some people. How how does that affect relationships by living with HIV, and how do you help navigate those challenges?
Well, one of the things that I make very clear to people is that here in the state of Arkansas, the law requires that if you are going to have a sexual relationship with someone, you have to notify them your status beforehand. And it's part of the laws that are here that I had to learn when I moved here to this state, because they have very strict criminalization laws around HIV.
Hmm.
I have my own opinion about that, but
Hmm.
I have to follow the law on what it says here. And I have to make sure that my community is aware that these laws do exist in this state, and that it's extremely important before you get in trouble that you notify somebody that you have HIV before you engage in any sexual activity with them. So I have to explain that to them so they understand that. And then we also talk about, okay, this is somebody that you are just meeting versus somebody that you've been in a relationship for a while. How do we navigate that conversation? How do we have that conversation? How do we role play having that conversation? Is it even something that we need to have, role play? Can you do it with that person? That person, if they already I feel, that you can have a conversation with them, let me help you navigate how to do that. But it's very important to explain the particular dynamics here in this state, because I don't want to see anybody getting themselves in trouble because they did not know. Because here in this state, unfortunately, not knowing is not an excuse.
Hmm. Yeah. So we've talked about how dealing with sensitive topics can come up, things like trauma or again stigma and disclosure. How do you handle sensitive topics such as like trauma?
I try to be very aware of what people are talking about, and I try to approach it from a active listening perspective. And I let them know right off the bat, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a social worker, I'm not a trauma specialist, but I have resources that I can provide if you need that. I'm here to listen, and I'm here to help you, navigate what it is that you're going through. I haven't had a lot of people open up about trauma in a group setting. It's happened individually. But in a group setting, my community tends to be very reserved about sharing their personal, private information. It's not something that you talk about openly with people you don't know or people that you're not close to. But when I've had some conversations bring up, I let them know that this is a safe space. Anything that you say here is not going to be revealed. It's confidential. We don't have to talk about the actual event. We can talk about your emotions. You don't
Mm,
have to identify what or who did something, but
mhm,
we can talk about how you're reacting to whatever happened. If you
mm.
need additional help or support, I have people that speak Spanish that I can connect you with who are therapists that will help you with that. But I want them to feel comfortable knowing that I'm here to support them and to help them navigate whatever situation they have.
I love that reframing of what you said. It's really important for folks to know that they do have support as well. Now let's talk about those supportive services like therapy and counseling. How important is that for folks living with HIV, and how does your group actually complement that type of work?
That I have noticed is that here in this state, there is very few therapists who speak Spanish.
Hmm.
Those that do speak Spanish do not accept um, the program that most people are under, which is Ryan White. So it's very expensive.
Mm,
Um, I was fortunate to get a list, and I've been calling many therapists around the state, trying to identify people, like, for example, here in Little Rock. And I've identified a few in North Little Rock, but they charge out of pocket. So the reality is that a lot of people are not going to access services if they don't have, let's say $125 an hour for therapy. So
yeah.
what I've been able to find is what people through UAMS can provide services. Who can I tap into through a very small network that I'm starting to build? Because the reality is that there's not a lot of people here that provide services in Spanish. It's very frustrating. It's the reality. So, how do I make sure that I find people that will be able to service the community that I work with specifically? Therapy and going to other resources outside of a support group is really important because people need to be able to be heard and they need to be able to know that their situations can be handled in a professional setting. And the support group complements that because it gives people a space to just be open and talk and be heard, most importantly. And then if they need additional help, we can look at what resources are available within the limited pool that we have. Because, and I have been looking since I've been here, believe me, for now a year, trying to find therapists that speak Spanish that, for example, will work with Ryan White. I haven't found a whole lot.
Yeah, we need to get on the Round White community and say, hey, y'all need to find providers that support the community because we always, in the field, we always hear, meet the community where they are. Make sure you have representation of your community members. But that's one key piece where I think Arkansas, not to criticize Arkansas, but Arkansas may have that opportunity for growth.
It's, I call it virgin territory. There's a lot of opportunity here, and I've been trying to, speak to key people um, to see how we can edge that forward. But this is not Florida. This is not Chicago, Illinois, where I come from. This is a whole different ballgame.
Yeah,
So
big difference.
huge.
Let's talk about some of the impact of the group. In the few months that you have facilitated the group, what impact have you seen on their confidence, their sense of empowerment, their sense of community since being a part of the group?
They feel more comfortable talking about themselves and talking to me about daily things that are going on in their lives. They feel that they have a space where they can go to and they are going to be heard. They don't feel that isolated anymore. Sometimes they call me in the middle of the week just to talk about whatever. I mean, they feel like they have somebody that is listening to them and that they have each other if they need to connect with each other. They feel that that degree of isolation is eroding. People in my specific community work so much that they literally all they do is work, go home, go back to work. So there's not a lot of social interactions or time for that. So this group, specifically for people living with HIV, has given them that space where they feel like somebody can talk to me if I have to have a conversation and they're going to understand me. I don't need somebody to translate what I'm saying or, speak in a different language. I can just be me. And I know Vadi is going to understand what I'm saying and he's going to give me, some information that might help me.
I love that. Great as a resource, ensuring people have that um, sense of community. Of course, that's important, but also a sense of safety, which is important as well.
And it's slowly building. It's slowly building. This is literally building. I mean, I can't say I have 20 people that attend on a regular basis because this is literally brand new. There is no other group in the state of Arkansas for people living with HIV in Spanish. So we're just, trying to stay focused on the goals and doing what we can.
Cool. That's really great. Like you said, the first of its kind. And so we appreciate the work that you're putting into it, finding resources for people, specify resources, specific resources, and not just saying, here's a clinic, there's a door, call this number, hit this person up. It's a warm handoff. It's an actual, not even a handoff. I go with you to the appointment. So
That's really important because, like I said, I have had more than one person tell me, thank you for coming with me because I
mm-hmm.
would not do this by myself. And they can have, the interpreter on the phone. That's not going to work. That's the reality of it. If I don't feel comfortable with the person that's going to communicate between me and the provider, I'm not accessing that service.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've also had the dynamic where some of the people who are actually doing that, the clients are like, I don't understand what they're saying. Click, I hang up.
Yeah.
And then they text me and I'm like, I can't do anything. I'm in the office. I'm not traveling to Rogers right now to deal with this. I can't.
Yeah, because you're only one person. So that's definitely and also an equally important aspect of that as well. So let's talk about advocacy. I know there may not be as much movement in advocacy, but what role does it play, whether it's in your own role or the role of your participants? And do you foresee any participants getting involved in advocacy?
Some actually I do, but they first need to feel comfortable talking about HIV and all the different layers that that topic entails. Like, for example, understanding how to communicate information about adherence, understanding how to communicate about stigma, understanding how to communicate about disclosure, all these different things that we have under the umbrella of HIV, but doing it in Spanish and doing it in a way that they can relay that information to other people without overwhelming them. So there's a training process that needs to happen so that they can become effective advocates. But some of the things that I also notice is that first they need to feel empowered to speak for themselves. And they need to feel that I can take care of me. I can go into the doctor's clinic and be like, no, this is what I want. Let me give you a very good example. I have people go in and when they get to the receptionist don't speak Spanish. And they immediately tell them, I don't understand you. We need to reschedule your appointment. No, that's not going to happen. You are going to see me because I know for a fact that under the law, I need to have somebody that will be able to speak to me in Spanish. So find somebody in the building, or worst case scenario, there is an interpreter service that you can call to understand what I'm saying. If, for example, Vadi is not available because I literally cannot be available for the entire state, I know what my rights are. I know what I can do to make sure that I get service. And then when they go into the doctor's office, when they meet with the medical assistant or with the nurse, the same dynamic. nobody should feel that they're not going to have their questions answered or that they're not going to get proper treatment because of lack of language access. So I let them know these are the things that you can do when I'm not available to make sure that that happens. And if you get any feedback or any pushback that you don't like, let me know so that I can bring it up to the right people. But I want them to feel empowered in reaching out to the providers and, being comfortable. Now, my situation is that I deal with people who literally do not speak English or have very limited English speaking skills. So also teaching them how to communicate in those kind of settings, giving them vocabulary, giving them phrases that they can use, teaching them how to have a basic conversation with your providers so that you can be understood and so that the provider sees the effort and actually makes an even stronger effort to communicate with them.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right. Advocacy starts with self. So, in order to be an effective advocate for others, you also have to advocate for yourself. So that's a really good point. Now let's talk about your experience. What has been the most rewarding aspect of being a facilitator?
Here in Arkansas, literally starting a group from nothing, from scratch, it's been extremely rewarding and very challenging at the same time. But the reward has been in actually getting to connect with people and meeting people where they're at and letting them know that we are creating a space for them to come to. And people responding to that, that's been very rewarding. Being able to start the network of meeting people in this state who are passionate about working with people living with HIV and who recognize the challenges and are willing to work in collaboration to meet those challenges and make the differences that need to be made. And I can talk about all the things that I've already noticed in this state and all the challenges and barriers that are already in place, starting when, the governor was first inaugurated. I'm not going to get into any of that here, but I have a long list of everything that I've already seen. And as a bilingual person, knowing what needs to change to be able to reach people effectively, because that's the other thing. I know a lot of bilingual people that work here, but they don't work in HIV and they definitely do not want to, leave their comfort zones to work in this particular field. So it's a very unique field also to be in because there's still a lot of stigma around working in this field and trying to work with Latino community, especially with people who don't speak English. I find it very interesting. A lot of people say, well, they need to learn how to speak English. Excuse me, that is not the right approach to dealing with people who don't speak English. That's not how you're going to have a conversation with them or even win them over if they have limited English speaking skills because people are going to get turned off just like that and they're not going to bother coming back and they're going to let other people know, don't go there because this is what my experience was. So word of mouth plays a very key role in my community as well. If I have a good experience going into a clinic, believe me, I'm going to let other people know and they will go to that clinic as well because I know that I'm going to be treated with respect.
Respect is really big too. Now, how do you take care of Vadi? We see you taking care of really the state of Arkansas, but how do you take care of yourself?
That is such a good question. I have been trying to. First of all, I had to move. I was living an hour away from work. Now I live in Little Rock. That's made a huge difference because now I don't have to commute an hour and 20 minutes basically every day. That has made a huge difference in how I take care of myself because now I have a place where I can go to and disconnect and unwind. When I get to my apartment, I'm not thinking about work. My phones, both work and cell phone, are shut off to anything related to work because I want to have my time. Right now, I'm putting together an apartment, so I'm in the middle of organizing and buying stuff and putting things where they are going to be, etc. I also like to watch TV. I like to watch comedies. I'm big on comedies, sci-fi, um, all sorts of different TV shows. Right now, I'm hooked on the new season of Dancing with the Stars. So that is an escape. I can watch something that is not even remotely related to what I do and just immerse myself in that. I love to cook. So now I have a kitchen that I can cook in and make food. That's very relaxing. I don't have a large friendship network here, but that's slowly building. So I do spend a lot of time, just by myself because during the day I'm surrounded by people in different levels, capacities. So I like spending time by myself and just relaxing, watching TV, listening to music. Just finding things that I can do that are non-stressful and don't have me thinking about, the five people that I spoke to earlier that need A, B, and C.
Yeah, cool. Well, congrats on your new place. So that's amazing. So talk to me about advice. What advice do you have for someone who may be hesitant to join a support group but could really benefit from that sense of community?
I would say that give yourself the opportunity to talk to the person who's facilitating it and have a conversation with that person. Get to know them. Ask all the questions that you have. Find out if it's a right fit for you. Um, be open about what your situation is. Not everybody is in the same dynamic and may need the same level of support. So have a conversation with the facilitator. Find out whether you would feel comfortable going to a group, and also give yourself a chance to actually go to one meeting so you see what the environment is like. Most of the people that I have in the support group are people that I actually work with individually, and I spoke to them individually about joining the group. And they're all busy. They have work, they have a lot of commitments. But they said, you know what? I like talking to you. I'm going to give it a shot. And when they came to the group, they realized that, wait a minute, I'm not alone. Somebody else here understands what it's like to live from a small town in Mexico and now living here in Little Rock. And, maybe I can talk to them after this group and hang out. So it's very organic how people build connections that way as well. But I would say that, find out information about the group or the agency, have, a conversation with the facilitator and see if that person connects with you and is listening to you, because that's really important. It has to be about what your needs are and what you would get out of a group. And since some people don't feel comfortable in a group setting, so maybe you can have that conversation with the facilitator individually and gauge from that conversation if it's something that you would benefit from.
Ooh. Now, what advice do you have for folks out there, as someone who created a group from ground zero? What advice do you have for other folks who may not see themselves in a support group that would like to actually start one?
I would first say to anybody who wants to start a group, and mine is, like I said, brand new baby diaper. I mean, it's literally still building. Is do your research in the area that you are going to be doing that group. Find out what the community is. Focus on a specific goal for that group. Living with HIV is very broad and it's very idealistic. And you can say, I want to start a support group for people living with HIV. What people are you talking about? Who is the target audience that you want to reach? What are the specific needs of that audience that you're trying to reach? In my particular case, I noticed that there was nothing, literally nothing for people who do not speak English. So that was my target. My target audience is people who don't speak English, who do not come to our regular support group that meets here once a month in English, who would not go to any other groups. First of all, there aren't any, but who do not have any other group that they will go to because there's a language barrier. So that was my target audience. Find out what your target audience is, and then what resources are already available. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. What resources are already available to guide you in building a support group? Who can you reach out to? I reached out to an organization in Alabama that I met at a conference in Houston, and I spoke to their facilitator, and I asked her all of the questions about how do I start a group in Arkansas. I had never been to Arkansas. I didn't know anything about Arkansas aside from Bill Clinton. Brand new state for me. So I needed to know, what do I need to put together that is going to let people know that, first of all, we are real and that we are going to meet you where you are at. So doing your research and having conversations with people is extremely important. And then having conversations with your organization as well. I had many conversations with Danny and with Bobby and with Keandre, and I let them know during my interview, when I was interviewed, this is something that I would like to see happen. I don't know that it's happening. And they were like, we don't have one. Go ahead and start one. But having ongoing conversations and let them know, this is what my particular group needs. It's not going to be the same thing as the English speaking group because it's a completely different community. And none of the people that I have in this group are going to go to the English speaking group because they don't speak English. They're not going to connect to anything that is happening. They're not going to go to pride events. They're not going to go to other activities. They don't speak English. So I will tell people, do your research, talk to people in the organization, in your state, if this is that dynamic. Find out everything that you can before you start reaching out to people who might be possible candidates for the group.
Love that. Do your research, people. Make sure you understand the environment that you're trying to start. So, I don't have any more questions. The only thing I want to ask you is, do you have any parting words for this episode?
I want to thank you for having me on this episode and for giving an opportunity to talk about support groups, specifically support groups with the community that I'm working with, the Latino community. It's an underrepresented community, and because of the language barrier, once again, people don't necessarily feel that their voices are heard, but they are there. Believe me when I tell you, they are there, and they are very much individuals that contribute to the community in this state as a whole. So I would like to encourage other people, providers, anybody who's listening to this podcast. If you know somebody that would be a candidate for the support group in Spanish, you can reach out to me. I can be reached at 501-413-7650 or at my email, which is my first name, Vadi at engagingarkansas.org, O-R-G. And I am very much looking forward to future podcasts. This has been a great experience, and I'm glad that I had an opportunity to talk about what we're doing here in EAC with the Latino community.
Awesome. We're definitely grateful to have you on the team at EAC as well as on this episode of EAC Speaks. And tell the people again how often you all meet.
Okay, my group meets the fourth Saturday of every month. Um, between 6 and 8 p.m., sometimes 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. Once again, it is the fourth Saturday of every month here at our offices at 6917 Geyer Springs Road in Little Rock. You can contact me at, once again, 501-413-7650 or via email at vadi@engagingarkansas.org, O-R-G. And I'll be more than glad to talk to you in English or in Spanish, give you all the information. I do have a flyer that I give out prior to the meeting, so if somebody is interested in the flyer, reach out to me, and I can let them have a copy of the upcoming meeting so that they can spread it also in their organization.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Vadi. This has been an awesome episode.
Thank you, Eddie. It was great to meet you.
Yes. And thank you all out there for listening and watching. We're super, super, super thrilled about the upcoming episodes. We'll be wrapping up the year in our latest season. And if you would like to be a guest on a future episode, please don't hesitate to hit us up. You can visit the website. You can email us, call us, probably even text if you need to. But yes, if you're interested in the group, it is called Unidos, right?
That is correct.
Don't forget to hit up Vadi. You can call, email, pop into the office if you need to. But yes,
definitely.
Thank you for tuning in to EAC Speaks, and we'll talk to you next time. Say ciao, Vadi.
Ciao. Take care, everyone.
The EAC Speaks podcast is partially supported by the Arkansas Department of Health through a grant funded in part by the CDC. All discussion is solely the responsibility of each participant and doesn't necessarily represent the official views of Engaging Arkansas Communities, the Arkansas Department of Health, CDC, or the U.S. government.